Morning, everyone. My name is Molly McGurr. I am the Event and Program Manager for Traverse Connect. And we just want to thank you all for joining us here today. This forum is for you. This is an opportunity for you to ask any and all questions that you may have, any concerns. This is the time and the place. To ask questions, there is a Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. So within that Q&A, you can go ahead and submit your questions. I never read the name out loud when people do submit the questions, but if you feel uncomfortable asking it, there is an anonymous button as well that you can use that won't show your name to anyone. In addition, I did just want to note that this will be recorded today and posted on our Traverse Connect YouTube page and our Traverse Connect website within 24 hours. So on that note, I would now like to turn it over to Brenda McClellan. Brenda, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you, Molly. Hi, everyone. I am Brenda McClellan, the Director of Investor Relations with Traverse Connect. And with us today, we have Alexander Hausman in red. Alexander is the Northern Michigan Public Policy and Advocacy Communications Director for Michigan Realtors. Alex has an extensive background in public policy and over 3 years in the Michigan House of Representatives. He has been instrumental in the passing of various pieces of legislation, and Alex works diligently to defend private property rights and ensures Michigan realtors have the greatest opportunities. And Alex continues to work on protection of Michigan's short-term rentals. And we have Connor Miller with us in blue. Connor is the Government Affairs Director at Traverse Area Association of Realtors. Connor is also the chair of the Traverse City Young Professionals, a program of Traverse Connect, and seasonally supports summer tourism in Traverse City as the on-field host for the Traverse City Pittsfitters, our local summer collegiate baseball team. And with that, we'll let Alex kick things off. Thank you both for joining us today.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Molly, and thank you, Traverse Connect, for having me. I hope everyone is staying healthy and enjoying some of this nice weather that we are all hopefully receiving right about now. I wanted to give a quick update on Executive Order 110. Most importantly, it is the opening of short-term rentals in the state of Michigan. I also will give a quick update on Executive Order 114 and 115. So let me start off. So Executive Order 110 basically opens up short-term rentals in the state of Michigan, at least with respect to the previous local restrictions in place prior to COVID-19. So the Michigan realtors are kind of, we're relying on property owners to prescribe regulations and guidelines to the renters of your short-term rentals. There are not any specific regulations specified in the Executive Order 110 with regards to short-term rentals. We have seen and been connected or contacted with some questions regarding the patron limit, for outside and inside. We're not directly connecting that with any short-term rental regulations or guidelines presented by the executive order or the governor. So it's really going to be shifted to the property owner and that of the rentee of that short-term rental to ensure that everyone's comfortable with the situation, that they're following the population guidelines of that specific property, and so forth. So obviously we would encourage people to follow the CDC guidelines that have been put out the past 3 months that everyone's been hearing about. Those are always the best recommended best practices that we ask people to follow. And obviously I can answer some more questions too. I just kind of wanted to give a brief overview of what that is and kind of tell you that short-term rentals are now open again for rental and business, and that the executive order really truly does not have too many regulations and limitations on what you can do in your short-term rental. So moving on to Executive Order 114 and 115, these really just describe to folks to continue to follow, the PPE guidelines. When you leave your house, always obviously wear a mask, keep that 6 feet distance between one another. We want to encourage people to take these very seriously. There's still obviously COVID-19 out there, but we want to make sure that people can get back to their regular lives as soon as possible. And this is a great way to do so without spreading the virus even more and having a second wave, and then having to deal with that in the near future. So another thing that's highlighted in the executive order 115, I believe, is businesses that receive general public customers are more apt to adopt a strict protocol for that individual business, right? So each business is kind of encouraged to come out with a plan that they plan to follow in respect to the CDC guidelines and PPE and the 6 feet distance. And you've already seen a lot of businesses adopt this, but this is really for the local, mom and pop shops that open back up and only have a population capacity of, 25 people max. So we want to be sure that those businesses are still, following the CDC guidelines and coming up with a plan to ensure that they don't allow or help the spread of this virus. So indoor gatherings, 50 people, outdoor gatherings, 250 people, persons not from the same household. So the same family, right? If you have a big gathering of friends and family, people that are not from the same household must remain 6 feet apart at all times, or at least do your best to do so. And to obviously prevent the spread of that virus. Last thing, really, and then I can pass on to Connor for some local regulations. But I just want to clarify that indoor concert venues 25% capacity, outdoor concert venues 50% capacity. I think the sporting venues too. I think Connor will get into that a little bit. Are there too. I think 50% or somewhere around there. So. Like I said, a lot of the new regulations are going to be pushed to the local government and kind of out of the state hands now. And then, we're just hoping that we don't see a second wave of this so that we can all just continue our lives healthy, happy and prosperous. So, Connor, I will pass it over to you. And then obviously, if there's any questions later on, I will be happy to answer those.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, and that's an important thing. As Alex was stating, the Executive Order 110, which opened and allowed short-term rentals to begin marketing and operating again on June 1st, they do not provide a lot of specific laws, specific regulations that you have to adhere to. The piece that I think is important and what I'm going to touch on is providing some of that guidance. Some of that guidance that's been provided at a local level through our health departments. That is, I think in a lot of ways, it's about your consumer confidence. So we want to make sure that you're provided with those tools to make sure that you, as well as any of your customers who may come to rent, feel safe. So I know that that's a big piece of this, that although there are not a lot of stipulations, that there are not a lot of requirements directed at the state level, there is guidance that can help you to make sure that you feel safe, that you have some practices that you can implement, that you can also communicate to anyone who may be coming up to rent your short-term rental, that they feel safe in doing so. So I also think it's an important thing to note is that you also need to, kind of in your checklist, in making sure that you open up and you're able to open up your short-term rentals, is to check with your local government. That's very important, to check with your local government and make sure that they don't have a restriction in place that still remains on short-term rentals. I have done a little bit of research, and frankly, I haven't covered all of the localities. Many did not put one in place that was a greater restriction than the state level, and some most notably, Traverse City did put one in place, and then they quickly removed it a day after, on June 2nd, after the governor's executive order. They removed their restriction on short-term rentals operating. But it is important to know and confirm that there is that allowance at a local level. So as it is my understanding, whether it is a state or local government, the strictest policy for health considerations, that is the policy that you have to abide by, whether that comes from the state or local. Again, I'm not familiar with a ton that are in place local, but I would, if just for due diligence, it's best to check with your local government either by their website or reaching out to their government office. A lot of the websites have as one of their primary pages a COVID-19 page, so if they put anything an additional in place, you can find it there. So just want to make sure that I brought that information up. And then now, so kind of working through your checklist, it's allowed at the state level. It's now, you've checked with your local government, it's allowed there as well. So now you kind of moving ahead, now it's about operating and making sure that you can determine how you may be able to operate, make sure that you feel comfortable in operating. So I'm gonna do a quick screen share. Bear with me, hopefully this will work out. All right. So hopefully you can all see this. So with the Traverse Area Association of Realtors, we have worked together, at least publicly on our website, a lot of this information. So you can go to taar.com. We have a COVID-19 resources page to make available to our members and to the public some of these resources related to short-term rentals. But you can go to the COVID-19 page, and I'll also be happy to share any of these in the chat for anyone that's interested. But you click on that page, and this is that page we have here. We have a section right at the top on getting back to work safely, which we have also included information on short-term rentals. So I'm going to start with, and this is a great resource, again, for some guidance. It is not a direct regulation that you must follow, but it is good guidance to help you with some, as Alex mentioned, some best practices in your efforts. So I'm going to jump into this. This was put out by the Grand Traverse County Health Department, and I'm just going to try to walk through some of these four main points. I already hit on checking with your local township, village, or city office to ensure that there's not an additional restriction, just to make sure that you are able to operate. And then also something that has been recommended, CDC guidelines, there is a suggestion that you establish a wait time of 24 hours between guests. And some of this is due to making sure that there's an ability to clean and disinfect, which I'm sure we may have quite a few questions about that, just making sure in providing that for the comfort level of you and your guests is they do have the wait time of 24 hours as a suggestion from the CDC. And part of it is also, as they mentioned in here, there have been some studies that show that the virus can remain in the air. So, it's kind of reinforcing, as necessary, those who are on separate households, we just want to make sure that there's a gap. So if there is any concerns about the virus being airborne, that those are alleviated. So it's again, guidance, not a requirement, but something that you may want to consider for the comfort of your guests. And then I want to talk about cleaning and disinfecting. So there's, as I saw, there were kind of two main points, and we can jump into the extended details on some of these guidelines that are provided. But it's important to make sure that you clean first and then disinfect if going through any process for cleaning up a short-term rental following a guest or prior to a guest. And so what I think is very helpful is the EPA has put together a list of common household disinfectants that are registered. This is that page right here. And again, I will reference, we do have that information up on tar.com, and I'll be providing it as needed in the chat and to Traverse Connect. But you can find all of this, and you can vet to confirm any of the disinfectants that you may be using, that they do in fact or have been proven to remove COVID-19 from surfaces. So that's a great resource in implementing and adding to any cleaning practices. And they also mentioned that either anything on this list, or there's also cleaning solutions with diluted household bleach or at least 70% alcohol are also believed to be effective against the coronavirus. This list is a great starting point to help you verify any items, but also that guidance can also be helpful in using any other cleaning materials. And then I'm gonna quickly try to walk through, going back, some of these cleaning guidelines. So it's suggested that you wear protective gear when cleaning, that you ventilate the room, make sure that the room is ventilated for air circulation, especially when you're using a lot of these disinfectants, just to make sure that there's not a concentration of any of those chemicals in your space. Wash your hands before and after doing the cleaning, just to make sure that you are sanitized beforehand and sanitizing yourself after doing the cleaning as well. Reinforce that cleaning and then disinfect. And it's suggested that you use disposable items, just so you can once you've cleaned, you clean that up, throw it away, and take it out with the trash. So then you've gotten rid of any materials that may still have the virus on it. As is good guidance from this, as the CDC has mentioned many times, is just avoiding touching your face while cleaning. Reinforce that EPA list of disinfectants, and also some of the highly trafficked spaces, spaces that might be forgotten is some of the sofas, rugs, different porous surfaces. So thinking about those will be important, just in making sure being thorough in cleaning. There's a little more guidance here related to linens, just washing those at the highest heating setting. Again, it kind of reinforces when you're using something, as much as possible, use practices that are disposable, so that you can take out any of the virus that may remain after the cleaning's been done. There's recommendations in cleaning and disinfecting a vacuum cleaner. Line trash bags, again, a lot of this use as much disposable as possible. And then just while you're cleaning, checking the expiration dates for some of the materials, which I'll kind of move into. I think I've covered most of it here, but I think the disposal pieces are very important in doing that cleaning and disinfecting, just to make sure, especially for confidence level, that any concerns, any virus that might remain is being taken out after the cleaning process has been done. And what's great is this checklist, which can kind of help you walk through for any of your spaces, just trying to cover all of those frequently touched spaces. I know we've had a lot of guidance we've been fortunate enough that real estate activities started to open up in early May. And some of those best practices, and just making sure that spaces that are highly touchable, if you will, like light switches, doorknobs, just making sure to cover those and try to limit the touching of those spaces. But just in the cleaning practices, making sure to cover all those that may be highly trafficked by different people who may stay at your short-term rentals. So again, a great resource by Grand Traverse County. I'll reinforce over and over again, it's not a be-all, end-all. It's not a required expectation, but for confidence, I think it can be very helpful in walking through that. And then I want to get to a third point on helping guests protect themselves. So I think a lot of what this is about is making sure that our guests feel safe in coming here. And I've really appreciated the tagline that Traverse Connect has utilized, staying safe to stay open. And I think this is a lot of those pieces, these cleanliness practices, but also some of these things you can do to help your guests feel safe in being in a space. It's suggested to provide some extra materials for cleanliness, just to make sure that people staying at your short-term rentals have those elements that they may need to do their own cleaning when they're staying at the space. This is just a short list, some basic items to consider And I do notice a lot of the suggestions are, again, disposable, which I think can be helpful just in providing some of that confidence in the cleanliness of the space. Also encouraging guests to maintain a cleanliness and health safety, and reinforcing some of those guidelines. Some of those, as Alex mentioned, are put in the state executive orders related to 6-foot distancing, wear a mask, and again, just providing access to a lot of these cleanliness products. And then finally, related to helping guests protect themselves, is just providing guests with health, safety, and local information. And I think it's important to note that providing them some of that information of where they can go for information, for assistance, if unfortunately they are put in that circumstance, and also just reinforcing the practices. And I think a lot of this is just providing some of that information, some guidance, which many people may already be aware of, but just making sure that they feel safe, that you have taken some of those precautions to make their stay a safe and enjoyable and healthy one. The Grand Traverse County, they have put together some of these documents, which you can just very quickly from their toolkit print off as something that you may want to share with some of your guests, that just covers all of this just in quick infographics, just to reinforce what some of the best practices may be to stay safe and healthy. So I covered that, and I do want to touch on, and I admit that this is not specifically in our wheelhouse, in my wheelhouse, but I will touch on another resource that was put out from Benzie and Leelanau District's Health Department. They kind of reinforced some of the guidelines that were outlined in Executive Order 100, as Alex covered, and they also put together, let me see that, make sure that I have it pulled up. There should be on campgrounds, and so I want to make sure that I pull that information up for you real quick. Oh, and I apologize, take me just a second. Too many links up. All right, so here's our campground FAQ. So this kind of walks through, and I'm just going to walk through this really quickly. Again, this is not specifically in my wheelhouse, but this is Benzie and Leelanau District put this together, kind of covers some of those things of if you happen to be an owner of a campground, and reinforces that you are able to open as of June 1st in the executive order on June 1st. And then just kind of walks through, again, some of these safety protocols and where they're outlined largely in previous executive orders, 110, 97, and then also what's a nice resource that they connect to is there's and I believe this is a national resource on reopening RV parks and campgrounds. So a lot of the specific questions related to, I think there's sometimes that struggle of spaces that may be communal spaces, and being able to open those up. There is some guidance. I won't go in great detail in that, but that is available in reopening an RV park or campground. So that's a great resource right here that's available, and they help direct you to these different pages to cover that. So I think we covered that, and I want to make sure, I'm gonna zero this over, minimize the screen a little bit, make sure I covered everything. Oh, and then the one other thing I just wanted to touch on is regarding all of the different local health departments. If you have any questions, they are your best resource for the most up-to-date information. As we all know, a lot of things have been continuing to evolve over time. Our understanding of everything has been evolving over time, and they are our greatest resource in getting up to speed. I recognize again that the resource that was put out by Grand Traverse County is a resource that was made by the county. It is again guidance. It's I think it can be useful for anyone, regardless of your county. It is again not a regulation. It is guidance just to help you in your efforts. And I want to reference the fact that we do have all of the different health departments that cover most of Northwest Michigan. listed on our tar.com website. We have the Benzie-Leelanau District, the District Health Department 10, which covers kind of in our shorter extended region, like places like Kalkaska, Crawford, Manistee, Wexford, Grand Traverse County Health Department, of course, and then the Health Department of Northwest Michigan, which covers some of our neighbors to the north in Antrim, Charlevoix, Emmett, and Oswego. So I think I've covered most of the content we have here. I see there were a couple chats and maybe some questions coming in. I'd love to get into those and try to help us as best we can.
Yeah, Connor and Alex, thank you so much. That was really great information. Connor, first and foremost, are you able to drop some of those links that you were referencing into the chat so people can go ahead and pull those up and be able to find them easily?
I sure can. So I'll start plugging away.
Perfect. All right, and then the next question, which I believe you did just answer, but does Benzie-Leelanau have an STR toolkit?
So to answer that question, they do not have their own specific toolkit. That I am aware of at this time. So you can check their website. The guidance that they put out was largely just that short-term rentals are now operational. I would point people towards the Grand Traverse County Toolkit in the short term if you are looking for some of those guidance practices. They are applicable across county. But if you want to get some direct information and guidance on short-term rentals, I would reach out to the district health department for Benzie and Leelanau.
Perfect. All right, so this next question is, what do you suggest a private property owner should do after sending a local township multiple clear violations of the EO prior to June 1 change? Having sent photos, video, VRBO listings showing they are booked, and yet being told this is not a township priority, the sheriff is too busy, and the prosecutor won't do anything. Private property owners are being asked to police violators and turn them in as there are hefty fines to encourage compliance. The guidelines as well as local ordinances are in place, but they're not being enforced.
Yeah, so this is an unfortunate circumstance. So throughout this entire COVID-19 pandemic that we've all experienced, the state has been issuing obviously executive orders, guidelines, restrictions, but it's always fallen on the local law enforcement to enforce those regulations and guidelines, right? And rules. So if your local law enforcement are not enforcing this, there's not a whole lot you can do, which is extremely unfortunate. You can contact the Attorney General's office, you can contact Laura, but really what they're going to tell you is go to your local government, and petition them, because they are the ones that are supposed to be enforcing these rules and regulations.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. Which townships, cities, and villages have short-term rental ordinance?
So I will have to do some specific research on that. I'm not entirely sure on every single township, village, or county that has short-term rental ordinances. Connor, I saw you unmuted yourself. You might be able to step in here. I know there's some situations up north in Traverse City that are occurring right now that we've been in battle with, but throughout the state of Michigan, there's multitude. I mean, it's all different for every county and every township. So Connor, if you want to say something here, you can.
I am fortunate enough to have maybe a helpful answer to this. Is I recently went through the process, and I cannot speak outside of the 6-county region that our association largely covers and has members in. But I did do some research and covered all of the zoning ordinances across the 6 counties of Antrim, Benzie, Grand Traverse, Kalkaska, Antrim, and Wexford. So I covered those 6 counties, and I do have summaries for the short-term rental policies that may or may not exist in all of those localities. I think the best way to cover it is to kind of specific to a locality that you may operate in, and knowing that, because some go so far as to ban them, and some have different stipulations. Some are completely, you can operate them as you see fit. The definitions vary a lot. It is kind of a complicated thing to answer that, but I have created that resource. For better or worse, it is a resource of our membership. So if you had a specific question, I would direct you, if you have a local realtor that you work with, they do have access to all that information that they can provide you. If you're more comfortable, you could reach out to me and I can direct you specifically on specific localities. The hard part with this is it is an evolving situation. I know there are a number of local communities, specifically off the top of my head would be Elmwood Township, as well as the village of Elk Rapids, that are currently considering new ordinances or like a completely new ordinance or changes to their ordinances. So it's always an evolving situation. I know that's maybe a less straightforward way of answering the question, but if there's guidance or information someone's looking specific for a locality, I am able to provide that, or again, I would direct you to any local realtor that you currently work with. They do have access to that information and can provide it for you.
And someone did comment Garfield and East Bay. So maybe those are two that do have it.
Garfield currently has a ban. They did have some legal proceedings that they had in the last couple of years, but they are currently enforcing no allowance on short-term rentals in Garfield Township. East Bay, I don't know off the top of my head. I could find that information for someone and provide that to them afterwards.
Perfect. All right. And then what would they ask the realtors for in reference to your summary? What is the name of that document?
Oh, so it's a web page on short-term rentals, and it's available through our members-only website. So I guess if you could reach out to me or a realtor, but they do have access to it. I think you could just ask them if they have any information on that, or if they might be able to find any information from their association on it. I think that would probably be the best way to handle that.
Perfect. All right. And someone did comment East Bay does have a short-term ordinance, and someone said East Bay allows with a permit and license. So for anyone curious about that area, that's some of the feedback we're receiving. I know that you briefly touched on this, but do you recommend people bringing their own linens, such as bedding and towels?
I don't. Go ahead, Alex.
So again, this is going to be fall under the best practices, right? And that's something that you'll have to talk with the property owner about, really. If the property owner, because also, I mean, it could go both ways, right? The property owner would want to provide his own or her own bed sheets and linens to ensure that they're clean and disinfected, right? Because they don't want somebody else to bring their stuff in and have it infected and have it infect the entire property, right? So it goes both ways. So you can work with a property owner on that, and if you guys agree on a solution, then that works. That's really what it's about. Cooperation with the renter as well as the property owner.
And I think that's a good way to answer that question. I think that's a tough call. I think you just have to factor any of those things into any cleaning practices if you're trying to follow the guidance that's outlined in Grand Traverse County. So I think people will want to make that determination on their own. I know I kind of made a face when I heard that question. That does seem to skew a little outside of the guidance that's being provided. So just from a control perspective, it might be more helpful to just follow the Grand Traverse County, because it might lead to more steps that have to be taken, because you're not really sure how people might utilize and where they might place linens and different things. There's just a lot of things that need to be considered. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of how I would defer to the guidance if you are looking for some recommendations. And again, reaching out to the health departments. Your local health departments can provide you with a lot of great information to guide you.
Perfect. And then I know that you briefly touched on this as well, but some people have little booklets that they put together in advance for anyone coming to stay. Would you recommend those being updated with any restrictions, you know, if there's a capacity limit on places, or if certain restaurants are 100% requiring masks where others aren't? Do you recommend that be updated and provided to the people staying in advance?
Personally, I would say it can only help. More information is only going to help in adding additional confidence for people who are staying, and it's just going to reinforce you as someone that is doing the due diligence and trying to help make sure that they have a great and enjoyable stay.
That's right.
And this is something that is along those same lines, but that we haven't touched on yet, and that's updating personal websites. So if you are advertising on different websites, how do you recommend people, or what should they be advertising on their websites? Should they leave it how they normally have been, or should they be providing that information as well?
Well, I mean, if you have an updated plan as such, I would advertise it. If anything, it makes you look better, right? And it makes you look more appealing to that customer because you're taking these regulations and protocols seriously. I think yeah, you absolutely should advertise that. If you do have a concrete plan and are expecting renters especially to follow that plan.
Wonderful. And then the next question we have is, how are condo rentals being handled with things like narrow hallways?
Yeah, so there's no specific regulations as to condos. They're going to be handled the same as a normal short-term rental. It's really up to it's up to the renter, and it's up to the buyer, right? Provide those best practices, guidelines, and ensure that everyone is following the CDC guidelines. Like Connor said in his presentation, make sure that everything's sanitized. The most touched areas, such as handlebars, doorknobs, anything else, walls, I guess, if it's short-term or it's a narrow hallways, make sure that the walls are cleaned, because obviously you're going to be touching the walls when you walk through that narrow hallway. So it's really just the best practices. It's make sure everything's sanitized and cleaned, and you might have to spend some extra time there after the short-term or after the renter leaves to ensure that everything's spick and span, but that's just the time that we are currently living in. And and like I said, none of this stuff is required, right? It's best practices. It's the things that you probably should do, but it's ultimately up to that property owner and the renter themselves.
So on that note, some people may not be cleaning their property themselves, right? They might be outsourcing it from a different company, or outsourcing individual people. Do the same rules apply with other businesses where they need to be taking their temperature and recording what it is, or because it's a private property, does that rule no longer apply?
No, so businesses is completely different. So there are some regulations for businesses and companies that accept the general public on a day-to-day basis, right? And they're not all from the same family and so forth. So there was here. Let me go back to my notes here. For businesses, it's not required. It's still general practice or best practice for that situation that you just said, to taking temperatures as they're coming into the business. That's obviously best practice. That's what you should be doing. You're not required to do so. Businesses are also encouraged to post signage outside of the business for patrons who may have been ill prior to them coming to that business for the day or whatever. And hopefully that signage will say something along the lines of, if previously ill, maybe don't come into the business, at this time due to COVID-19 risks, or, risking the spread of the virus, whatever it may be. Businesses are, encouraged to take on those additional protocols as well. But obviously the capacity to 25%, of a square footage capacity, whatever size your personal business is, you have to take that into consideration. And I think, I believe that's about it. Connor,
Well,
if you might have something to add.
I'll build off of that.
Okay.
I would say, as Alex stated, business and a short-term rental are not being defined as the same. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, on that, but they're not really in the same boat. They're not really under the same definitions. What I can speak to for our association and working at it, moving into working back in the office, that steps that have been taken is looking in. What I found very helpful is actually going through the Executive Order 114 and kind of walking through that. There are sections specific to businesses, and you can kind of walk through, and it's like, develop a preparedness and response plan. Yep. Making sure that you designate a worksite supervisor. So there are like some different steps and processes in that, in doing that controlled environment. And I also give a shout out to Michigan Realtors, if it may be appropriate, but they actually, and here I'll do a quick screen share if I can, but they actually put together a template toolkit on re-engaging offices. It is largely focused towards real estate and some of those things, but it is publicly available on their website, and it's a great tool, and it just provides you a template just to walk through, and this actually downloads and provides you with worksheets that you're able to edit, that provides you a template preparedness and response plan that you can make some updates to make it your own, as well as visitor questionnaire, as well as employee questionnaire. So it is kind of a different process with short-term rentals versus business. And this may have been a long-winded way for us to answer that more direct question. But yes, there are tools out there, and businesses are defined separately than short-term rentals.
That's great to know. The other question we had is there any certain protocol or precaution that needs to be taken with pools and hot tubs?
Well, I can give it my best shot here. If it's on your private property, it's still, it's ultimately up to you. If it's at a short-term rental, it's ultimately up to you, right? The property owner or the rentee to ensure that it's sanitized and cleaned out for the next renter. That is something that you should probably, if you are going to have one of those design plans, you should probably include that. They're definitely they're definitely, a sanctuary for germs and bacteria. So that's definitely something that you should consider when designing stay safe, stay healthy, personal property plan or something, whatever you may call it. But yeah, so that's a good question.
I'll take the easy way out for that question. I would say reach out to, that is a great question, to make sure that you cover it thoroughly. I'd reach out to your local health department. They might be able to provide you, just building off of, and Alex is kind of stating, it's cleaning protocols, and again, it's guidance. It's not a mandate, but I would reach out to your health department. They can probably help point you in the right path and think through that solution if they haven't already. And I know they're continuing to provide more and more guidance. So I know some of these questions are maybe a little more nuanced than was able to get out in the first round of some of the toolkits, but that would be my recommendation.
Perfect. I don't see any additional questions coming in at this time, but I did want to ask both of you if you have any final words of advice or final thoughts that you would like to leave this group with.
Sure. Of course, so I say that there's no, requirements brought upon by the state, and there isn't. But obviously, we just experienced an unprecedented pandemic, right? That affected everybody. We need to ensure that everyone's doing their part to make sure that we don't have a second wave. We do not want to experience another second wave of this. So doing these small little, best practices, like I always say, putting together these packets for short-term rentals are extremely important for you to do. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you have to do it, because you don't, but it is, it's extremely important to do it, just for the protection of yourself, and for the general public's health as well. Like Connor keeps on saying, check with your local health department. They are the ones to contact right now for any questions in regards to putting together that packet for your rentals and for your private properties. But it is extremely important. If you do have, well, you probably won't now because everything's open up, but if you did have concerns of people violating the orders, obviously, it's really dependent on your local law enforcement to enforce those laws. But you are more than welcome to contact the Attorney General's office, their Constituent Relations Division. They would be happy to answer your phone call and take down your complaint or your concerns, and then they will pass that up, obviously, and probably redirect that to the local law enforcement. But coming from them, from their position in the state government, it might have a little bit more hold to it. But you can also contact Laura, and they're there to help you with the regulations and licensing issues as well. So again, thank you, Traverse Connect, for hosting me today. I hope that I could provide you with any information. Really, I didn't have a whole lot there because there wasn't a whole lot in the executive orders, but that's a good thing sometimes, right? So we're all reopening. Our economy can get back to where it was. Our private property owners can use their property for the way that they wish, and as long as folks take it seriously, I'm happy. So thank you guys again. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. My contact information is on the Michigan Realtors website. Definitely use our industry resources page as well. We have a ton of information on there in regards to everything that has been going on for the past 4 months. So thank you again. Hope to talk to everybody soon.
And I'll just quickly add on to that. I think a messaging that I think we're reinforcing throughout this presentation is it's guidance in helping you. And I'll use the tagline that I have heard from Traverse Connect, to stay safe, to stay open. And so this guidance and reaching out to your health department with any nuanced questions that may come up is just another way to help us all stay safe and stay open. We know how important summer is for our region. And so I appreciate everyone who was on this today to become more informed and make sure that you have some best practices in operating and some guidance as you operate your short-term rentals this summer. So thank you all for joining us.
Perfect. Well, Alex and Connor, thank you both again so much for being here with us today. I know we greatly appreciate it, and I hope everyone who attended was able to gain some great information as well. We hope everyone stays safe, stay healthy, and has a wonderful weekend coming up here soon, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Brenda.